Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. Every now and then, I get comments from people saying that they've never actually played Classic, but they're still interested in it and are planning to play it when the official servers come out to see exactly what they missed. For these people, I thought it might be helpful to make sort of a preparation / what to expect video to get them an idea of what Classic World of Warcraft is all about, and the reasons why that for over a decade there's been a movement to bring it back. This is probably a bit premature since we don't even have a release date yet, and we're not sure if it'll be pure no changes. The only thing we know really is that it'll be set in patch 1.12, which was the final vanilla patch. But even still, I want to do it anyways because it'll be fun, and I like talking about Classic if you can't tell yet. Probably a bit redundant for a lot of my subscribers, but again, this video is for those who have zero knowledge of Classic and they just want to figure out what it's all about. It's also one of the ways to deal with the hype and tide myself over while they work on it, I guess. Especially with the news about the official demo, so let's get into it. This video will be a mix of just the general feel of the game, but I'll also go into some of the more finer details to give you both a broad and a narrow look into the game as it used to be. The main thing is, and I'll go into more detail with this in a bit, is that you'll find that a lot of things are much more involved and time consuming in general. From leveling to traveling to questing, Classic World of Warcraft made the simplest of tasks very involved, and it'll be the main thing to see if you like it or not. Just to throw out some examples, there are no quest waypoints, mobs are more difficult in general, so you can't just gather and AoE everything without ever having to eat or drink. The mobs themselves aren't marked for you for your quest, so you actually have to read and make sure that you're killing the right enemies. Gold is also much harder to come by, and you have to scrimp and save to even train your abilities. Yeah, you had to actually go to a class trainer back then and pay them to train skills, whether it be for completely new ones or higher ranks of existing ones. Hunters use ammo, they have to actually level their pets and pay attention to a happiness meter, and their pets also had to train skills. Rogues had to go manually level lockpicking. Every weapon has a skill tied to it that you also level, and it goes on and on. There were so many RPG elements in vanilla that have been chipped away over the years, and it'll make or break Classic for you. Even though I think even Classic World of Warcraft is seen casual in comparison, if you like those old school RPG games like Baldur's Gate and you want an MMO with some borrowed aspects and difficulties from that, you'll love Classic World of Warcraft. Some people, such as myself, love this stuff, and some people hate it. So, expect the game to be more complex in general. There are exceptions certainly. In my opinion, raiding was actually pretty straightforward compared to current World of Warcraft, since understandably, it was still the growing stages. Back then, it was a big thing for a boss to have a second phase other than just an enrage or something, whereas today, it's common to have 2 or even 3 or 4 phase fights. Gearing today is also more complicated, I think, with the advent of Warforging and Titan Forging. There's no simple best in slot list to follow like you had in vanilla, since any item has the potential to proc to crazy eye levels, and you also have Azerite armor thrown into the mix there as well with BFA. But on the other hand, in Classic, you had many more armor upgrades and enchants, and various little things you can do to min-max things. Just like anything, it's not black and white. I'm painting with a pretty huge brush here though, so let's go into a little more detail, starting with the first thing that you'll notice, which is leveling. As I said, much more time consuming in general, and there are a few factors to it. One is, it's simply the amount of experience you get versus the amount you need to get to level 60. Now, for me, it's been like 13 years, but on average, I want to say that it took people at least a month of real time, not slash played, to get from 1 to 60, and that's if you were hitting it pretty hardcore. If you don't play that often, you can expect it to take a few months actually. Another reason was the quests were much more sparse in general. Oftentimes, if you didn't have extreme knowledge of the game and all of its zones, you would have to grind mobs or dungeons to sort of fill the gap to reach the next questing hub. An oversight in game design, some might say, but a little fun fact for you is that the original game had just 100 quests before they realized that, that's enough to get players to like level 15. I think we need a few more here, guys. I think this time around, it'll be much easier for people with how many resources there are now. These days you have wikis, much better populated database websites, full YouTube guides, I'm sure, with optimized leveling routes and class guides. So, if you choose to go outside of the game's resources, there's probably an answer, which wasn't always the case back in 04 to 07. Reason number 3 is what I mentioned earlier, and that's the overall difficulty. These days, no matter what class you are, even if you're a healer, you can gather 5 or 6 mobs, AoE them down with ease, and move on to the next pack immediately. Or maybe you can just take another player's group and sort of leech some kills. That's not really possible in Classic. Attacking 3 or even just 2 enemies sometimes was just asking for it, unless you use one of your big cooldowns. The enemies hit harder, they have more health, and you'll find that food and water are absolutely necessary because you'll have to eat or drink after every fight or two. Group quests are much more abundant and actually require groups, see Hogger. No group finder means you have to walk to the dungeon, which are guarded by elites. You guys have probably heard me talk about this before. It's a journey to say the least, but as a result, a huge accomplishment when you finally get that last level. It is harder for some classes and easier for others. I want to say that Warrior was the most difficult since they didn't really have any self-heals, and probably Hunter was the easiest because you could always have your pet tank, and if you ran across a tough elite, you could always just kite him. Speaking of classes, this will also be something you can start thinking about now. To sum it up, they're much more niche in Classic, I'd say. They all have a very specific role to fill, which has its ups and downs. An up is that it makes you more useful and unique, and a down is that you're sort of expected to fill that role. For example, in the raiding scene, if you're a priest, you're typically expected to be a healer. Warriors are usually tanks, druids healers, as well as paladins, and so on. You can do whatever you want, and I think this time around, since everyone is much more accustomed to the game, we'll actually see Retribution Paladins, Shadow Priests and whatnot raiding, at least in the early tiers. But if you want to optimize things, or maybe be in the top raiding guild, you should take some care in the character select screen and think about what your goal is endgame, if it's even raiding at all. Just like the current game, you don't have to raid. Lots of people are perfectly content with just dungeon running, or some odd PvP here and there. Even still though, if it is raiding, you can be a Retribution Paladin if you want. You'll be a one-man wrecking crew in PvP, but just know that you might be asked to heal a lot, and since there's no dual talent specialization, you can't really switch specs a lot unless you really want to burn through all of your gold. As always, the key is to find the right guild and the right group of people. This brings us to communication. You can get all the way to the max with never grouping or talking to anyone, but interacting with other people is going to be hugely advantageous to you. It's true in current as well, but it's especially crucial in Classic due to the increased difficulty, and because not everything is self-explanatory. If you have a question, just ask, and most people will be willing to help you out. Having trouble affording food? Just ask a mage to conjure you some, and you'll save a bit of money. Find the best enchanter on your server, and remember his name whenever you need to upgrade your gear, or for any profession for that matter. Since leveling is so tough, it's much harder to get all of the professions leveled yourself, and you'll find yourself needing other players to fill in the gaps. If you see another player questing in your area, ask to group up so you can share mobs, or maybe knock out all of the group quests for that zone. Make friends so you can form groups for dungeons more easily, and find yourself a guild. You'll benefit greatly in more ways than one. It depends on how they do it, but if it's true 1.12, there won't be any cross-realm stuff, aside from Battlegrounds I guess. But outside of that, as a result, the community is much more tight-knit, and you'll oftentimes run into the same person frequently. Because of this, your actions have consequences, either positive or negative, and you can sort of build a reputation, either positive or negative. You could be that really good tank, or the enchanter with all of the recipes, or that a-hole that everyone avoids and can no longer hide behind the veil of sharing the same shard with 100 different servers and blending in with the crowd. Moving on to the more miscellaneous stuff though, next up we have races, which are also pretty important. Today, it's mainly aesthetics for the most part. All of the DPS racials are sort of balanced to be even with each other, and everything else is utility that's based off of your preference. In Classic, the races are much more impactful, I think. Humans are a great choice for warriors since they have increased skill with maces and swords, which is a huge DPS increase for raiding. They also have perception, which allows them to see stealth from really far away, which makes them great in PvP in general. Especially human rogues, since rogue vs rogue is all based on who gets the opener. Dwarves are great hunters since they have increased skill with guns, and also Stoneform back then was ridiculous and made you immune to bleeds and poisons for its entire duration, which makes them a hard counter to rogues since you can kite them so easily. Orcs, I remember, are amazing in PvP due to their resistance to stun. I know as a vanilla rogue, I always hated attacking them because if they got that resist, it was game over usually. Undead get a Fear Breaker, which is very handy in both PvP and PvE, and so on. I won't go over every single one. They all have their strengths though. Except for trolls I guess, unless you really want that health regeneration, and plus throwing weapons skill. So, races. Definitely something to consider in Classic. At the end of the day, you should go with what you like, and if that's just aesthetics, that's fine. Just keep in mind that they're much more impactful in Classic than they are in Current. The next thing to know is that gold will also be much harder to come by, and if you're not careful, you'll be broke all the time. Gold sinks include food and drink costs, repair bills, skill training, talent respecking, and mount training to name just a few. To save some gold, some tips are to be very selective in what you train at first. Some skills are more important than others, so don't be in a rush to train absolutely everything. One of your main goals while leveling is to have 100 by the time you reach level 40, and that's for your mount training. That's right, you'll be on foot all the way to level 40, which is sort of the halfway point to 60 in terms of time spent. So, on your way there, you'll want to be using the auction house pretty liberally. Professions are going to be critical, and they should be one of the first things that you train after leaving your little introduction area. You also have to hold on to your gold though. The best way to do this is to avoid dying obviously, but also some little things like I mentioned earlier, like asking mages for food if you see one. Or hey, if you're a mage yourself, you can make some money by selling food, or even portals to other major cities. Like I said, traveling was much more time consuming, so people are definitely willing to trade gold for time. But this video isn't a gold guide, let's get back on track here. I just wanted to bring it up so you see just how big of a deal it was back then. You didn't have the option of sending followers out on missions and log in to free gold basically on a daily basis. You actually had to go out into this much more unforgiving environment and find ways to make it. So, all of this is to say, Classic is pretty unique. And I'm just scratching the surface here really. The raiding scene is way different than Current. They're 40-man, classes are much more niche, and certain classes are unequivocally the best at certain roles. Even the gear sets supported this mindset, with warriors having all defensive gear for their sets, for example. If you were DPS, you had to mix and match random pieces together to be viable. It worked, but you did look a bit silly. The PvP is a whole other beast, and I could talk about how to prepare for Classic for an hour probably if I went into more detail, but I think you get the picture by now, right? Even very simple things can be adventures sometimes. Like doing this dungeon, you have to travel across the continent, and how do you do that? Well, you have to get on a zeppelin or a boat, but then you have to go through a few zones on foot to reach the right one. And when you get there, you find that you need to wait for your team and group together to even reach the entrance. Only then can you start the actual run. Just explaining it, it sounds annoying, and it will be for some players, but for others, it's more of a rewarding sort of thing. You just cleared through the dead mines, and you feel like you've accomplished something great. On to the next challenge. Has anyone here ever played the Dark Souls series? I always kind of equate classic World of Warcraft to that. Not in gameplay, of course, but just in the sense of being thrown into this giant world and not being told to go here, go there, press this button, and so on. You're literally left to figure things out for yourself, and it makes it much more difficult, of course, but once you get the hang of things, or you finally beat that boss after 1,000 tries, you're on top of the world. I guess it is kind of ironic I'm saying all of this in a video that's titled, How to Prepare for Classic World of Warcraft, but again, it's just something I like to talk about. I really could go on about it for hours here. Some people say that it won't be the same because it is 15 years after the fact, which will be partly true, I think. We'll never truly get that fresh experience again, but still, 15 years is a long time. And like I said, plenty of people who didn't even have the chance to play back then will be picking it up, and I think it'll be a really unique experience for them. I think people will figure out pretty quickly if it's their cup of tea or not. I'm hoping that they'll like it, so it's nice and active, and we have plenty of people playing, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. I'm just glad that we'll finally have that choice of current or classic after all these years, without having to go to third-party private servers. Personally, I'll be playing both versions since I enjoy both, but whatever your cup of tea is, I hope this video kinda gave you an idea of what to expect with Classic. My goal was to have people who know nothing about it come in here with the question, what is Classic and why do people look back to it so fondly? Hopefully you have an answer to that, or at least a vague idea of what it's all about. And most importantly, I hope you found the video interesting or entertaining. Like it if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.